Hello, everybody. I just want to make sure, can everybody hear me? If you can just give me a thumbs up. I think there's only one other person in the call. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Sorry, I just want to confirm, can you see the screen and
Yes,
everything?
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, I'm just going to start and then you can unmute yourself. That's perfectly fine. But
Okay.
I'm just going to start and then the recording I'll post for the rest of the class, okay? So for the
Okay.
first class, we are solely just going to cover, so this module unfortunately does have quite a lot of content to get through, hence why the classes do run every week. So I will post a very detailed schedule for all the students just to keep you on track because your assignment is due quite early. Okay. So the assignment I
Okay.
think is due the beginning of March, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Okay. Just want to go to my slides quickly. Okay. So just to introduce myself, my name is Lauren. I am quite young. I'm based at the Emrys Pretoria campus. That's my primary campus. So I am a full-time lecturer at that campus, and then I also lecture online for the online campus. My email address, I've posted an announcement with my email address. And also it's going to be on the slides. I'm going to post it on ARC as well. So just this short, very short background. I am an economist, so I did my BCom in economics. I did my postgrad in BCom honors in management, and I'm currently busy with my master's in business leadership. Okay, so that's just short synopsis of me. Okay. Then just to take you through this learning outcome. So this particular learning outcome that I did say to you is learning unit 0. So this is if you are downloading the module outline under your student materials, this is the additional learning or additional requirement over and above your module outline. So a lot of the material does come from there over and above that. Then it also builds into chapter 1 quite a lot. Okay, so running through the learning outcomes right now, it's just navigating the module outline a little bit. What is economics? Then to illustrate the relationship, because graphs is a very big thing in economics at the moment, the relationship and your analysis of your graphs. And then we're going to talk about the scarcity, the choice, and your opportunity cost. That's probably where we're going to cut off today. And then next week, we will cover the PPC, your goods, your ceteris paribus, your causation. And that should set you then on track because by next week, we should be covering learning units, the 0, 1, the week thereafter will be 2, the week thereafter that will be 3, and then your assignment is due. So you'll be on track for your assignment. And then we'll run through quickly what the assignment looks like. So just to make sure all the students are on the same page, this is the new textbook. I don't know if some students are repeating the module or not. This is the edition that was released this year. So if some students have the previous edition, that's also fine. There is very little in Economics 1A that has changed between the two editions. So just so that the students are aware, you can still use the old edition. We recommend this new edition, but you can use the old edition because there's very little that has changed between the two. Okay. Then just to explain how the textbook is actually structured. Okay. So economics, and this is more applicable to you guys in terms of your exam, not so much because you're assignment based, but for the exam, we can assess you in words, graphs, and numerical formatting. Okay. So that's also how the textbook explains concepts. It always explains a concept in word format, meaning physically defining the concept, and then in graphs to graphically illustrate, and I use particular words, graphically illustrate, define, okay, and then to physically calculate, right? So either of the three can answer the question, and usually it's 2 out of 3 that get assessed at a given time in the exam. Okay, but for your assignment, obviously, you can then be assessed in all three of those options, depending on the question. Okay, so just the breakdown of the module as well. Okay, so you guys have two assignments, assignment 1 and assignment 2. Like I said, assignment 1 is due quite early in March. Assignment 2, I can't off the top of my head now remember when it's due, but I'll double check on that one. Okay, and then the exam is a little bit later on in the semester. I think it's somewhere in May, if I'm not mistaken, May or June. Okay, so assignment 1 counts 25% towards your final mark. Then assignment 2 is 30% towards your final mark. The exam is then 35% of your final mark. And then we have ICE. So that's integrated curriculum engagement. So there are 6 ICE tasks, all right, that I will post before the end of the week. I will give you one set due date. So you can do it as you see fit, as how you are studying towards the module. Okay. Usually what I tell the students to do is try and while you're busy with the completion of your assignment, that that would cover learning units 1 through 3. Try and do the iSTARS 1 to 3 to match the learning units that you are currently studying for towards the completion of your assignment. Okay, because it makes things easier rather than trying to bundle everything and trying to complete all the iSTARS at the end, at the last due date. So that's just what I recommend students do. Obviously, it's entirely up to you. So I will release all the ICE tasks, hopefully before the end of the week. So you have that and you can start planning your life accordingly. Okay. So assignment 1, 25%. It should roughly take you about 10 hours. And usually what I tell the students is in terms of taking you 10 hours, what we actually mean is if you are going through the content throughout the semester or throughout or pacing yourself, it should take you 10 hours. But if you're going to leave it for the last day, it's probably going to take you a lot more than 10 hours to complete the assignment. Okay. It's a total of 100. It is open book. So you'll see assignment 1, assignment 2 is open book. The exam is closed book. So you'll be writing that physically or on campus or depending on where you are situated. You can use a calculator, additional research. You do have to do additional research. Otherwise, you're not going to get the marks, right? And it covers learning units 1 through 3. Then the assignment is 30, assignment 2 is 30% of your final mark. Also 10 hours, again 100 marks, open book, calculator allowed, additional resource sources is always recommended, and it's learning units 4 through 6. Okay. And then the exam is 35% of your final mark. It's a 2-hour exam, 120 marks. It's closed book. You get a calculator, you get a formula sheet that is provided to you. So you guys are lucky because the contact students don't get a formula sheet for test 1 and test 2. So they don't have assignments, they have tests. They don't get a formula sheet. They only get it in the exam. So you guys get the formula sheet in the exam. And then it covers, again, all learning units. Okay, so we're now done with the sort of formatting of the module. Okay, so my first question to all students is always, what is economics? Okay, so in my mind, right, economics is almost a daily thing. It's a daily activity that you are doing. Okay. So if we had to go through the formal definition of what economics is, we're saying it's a social science that studies the choices. And I always, in my slides, I always highlight in red the key words I want you to keep using, right? So it's very easy to put things in your own words. And that's what we want for you. Okay, to put things in your own words in a way that makes sense to you, but using the keywords that I'm giving you. Okay, so economics is a social science, and we're saying, why is it a social science? Okay, so essentially, social science meaning it's the interaction between people. That's what makes it social. And the science part of it, component of it, is we can actually quantify a lot of the choices that we are making, right? So it studies the choices that individuals, business, governments, and entire societies make to cope with scarcity and the incentives that influence and reconcile these choices. Okay, so first element, choices. So it's always based on us making choices every day, right? So this morning you woke up, you decided I need a coffee, right? So you went to your local coffee shop or your business or wherever you're working, and you decided to buy a coffee, right? So as opposed to buying coffee, you could have made another choice. You could have bought water, you could have bought tea. Okay, that's all choices that we're looking at. And then we start looking at, why did you make those choices? Okay, for what reason was it? Okay, so choices that individuals, businesses, so the business component, individuals, we now said you decided to have coffee or buy the coffee this morning at a particular price. That was a choice that you made. Okay, from a business perspective, a business looks at it from a different perspective to how an individual looks at it. A business is looking at it from a perspective of, is there a niche? Is there a need or a demand for coffee in the morning? Are people actually demanding coffee in the morning, or are they demanding tea in the morning? And then the business adapts according to that. Okay. Governments make certain choices, but usually their choices are quite broad because they're trying to look at pleasing almost everyone, and that doesn't always happen. Okay. And then entire societies, that's all of us collectively. So as individuals, as businesses, collectively, we are making choices. And if the government and everybody looks at it holistically, you'll see we tend to make the same choices every year or every cycle. Okay. And why we make these choices is we're trying to cope with the concept of scarcity. Okay. So to us, scarcity is simply, we all have unlimited wants, but we have limited means to meet those wants. And by saying that, we're usually referring to it as money, right? We all have unlimited wants. We want a lot of things. We don't all have the means, the money to satisfy those wants. Okay. And that's where choices come in. So we make certain choices based on the income that we have, right? And then the incentive part of it, an incentive sometimes, and in most logical cases, when we say incentives, we're referring to the income we're going to get. But in economics, we also say an incentive can be something that you are going to gain from making that choice. So if you had to make, or if you had to buy your coffee this morning, why did you buy that coffee? Is it because you're addicted to coffee? Is it because you have to obtain some level of satisfaction from drinking that coffee? Otherwise, you are not going to buy the coffee. You would have bought tea, you would have bought a Monster, an energy drink, whatever the case may be. So you have to gain some incentive from making the choices. And based on that, we are trying to satisfy this unlimited want that we have. Okay. So the broader definition, and obviously that's more microeconomics, which is 1A. Then you get macroeconomics, which is economics 1B, and that's looking at societies at large. So there we're saying it's economics that seeks to describe, explain, or analyze and predict, ultimately predict the phenomenon such as economic growth, unemployment, inflation, trading between individuals and countries, prices of different goods and services, poverty, wealth, money, interest rates, exchange rates, and business cycles. So essentially, based in that whole sentence, I've literally covered almost every chapter in the textbook, because every chapter covers every element of what is described here in this slide. Okay, so a lot of these concepts are in 1B because economic growth, unemployment, inflation, even trading between different countries, that is 1B because we're looking at societies at large. Okay, 1A is more the prices of different goods. Okay, poverty is again 1B, wealth, money, interest rates, exchange rate. Those are all elements that are covered in 1B. I personally, I absolutely love this definition of economics which is it's the study of how people interact with each other and with natural surroundings in providing their livelihood and how these changes over time. Okay, that in itself explains economics to a T. So it's how we interact with each other, and by interacting with each other, we are making certain choices again, okay? And our natural surroundings, right? So part of our natural surroundings is also a concept that we call the factors of production, okay? How we produce goods and services. And part of our factors of production is natural resources, meaning our land, our air, how we interact in these natural surroundings, right? To try and better our livelihood with certain choices that we make, gaining certain incentives based on our lifestyles and how these change over time. So the idea behind economics is also that unfortunately we keep making the same choices because we are rational beings. So we make the same choices in the same periods in the same of the year. And that's how businesses predict what to sell and how much of it to sell, because the logic is then that we will make the same choices. Okay. So this is the numeracy part of it. So again, I say to you in words, and I explain to you kind of sort of what economics is in word value. And I say to you, we can assess you in words, we can assess you in a number format or numerical format, as well as in graphs. Okay. So taking you back to school, and I think this is probably grade 5 or 6. I stand to be corrected on the grade there, but we use the concept of BODMAS, okay, which is brackets of order or brackets or order, division, multiplication, addition, and then subtraction, right? And the reason why something like BODMAS, which is, I mean, you learned donkeys and donkeys years for some students ago, is because our formulas become so complex that if you don't utilize the principles of BODMAS when trying to calculate these things, you will then ultimately get the answer wrong. Okay, so we always make sure that you cover the brackets first, and then division, multiplication, addition, and then subtraction. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the example I put there, but the onus is on you to make sure that you understand the principles of BODMAS. And then something else, and I'm taking you through here a lot of how questions get asked. Okay, so the formatting of the questions, which is the numeracy side of things. So we're saying, how do you calculate percentage change? And you'll see it more so when you're looking at stores. If you've noticed lately, stores have stopped telling us your Pick n Pays, your Woolworths, your Checkers, those kind of stores. They've stopped telling us that you are saving 10 Rand on this good. They started moving more towards you save 20%. That's what they've started doing. But if you actually go and calculate the change in the price, you'll realize it's not actually on special. But they started using that terminology. And that's what happens a lot in economics. We say percentage change in prices. Okay. So we either expect that you can then calculate what is the percentage change in the price, or we give it to you as a percentage change, meaning the percentage change in, for example, sake here, we're saying the price of a good has increased from 80 Rand to 88 Rand. Calculate the percentage change. And we know that it's actually changed by 8 Rand. So some stores still do that where they say the change in price, you're saving 8 Rand. Or in this case, the good has become more expensive. So you're actually losing out on 8 Rand. So this doesn't tend to happen in stores. They tend to go the opposite way, where the price might have been 88 Rand, and now it's 80 Rand, meaning you are saving 8 Rand. Okay, that's the percentage change. But if you're physically calculating it, we're saying, okay, if this product, now the price of this product has increased, it was 80 Rand, it's now 88 Rand. We know the difference in the price is 8 Rand. So determine the percentage change, we need to then express this as a percent. So we're saying it's the 8 Rand divided by 80 times 100. And that will give us 10%. Okay. So the quick and easy way is the difference in the price divided by the new price times 100, and that will give you your percentage change. So we're saying the change in the price of the good, percentage change in the price of the good is 10%. Okay, so some questions will give it to you instinctively, and they will say the price of the good has increased by 10%. Or it will say the price of the good was 80 Rand, it's now 88 Rand, and calculate the percentage change. So you have to be careful of what you're being given, and that ultimately determines which formula you are going to use. And then we also have a concept called rate of change. Okay, so it's very simple. It's new divided by old. New minus old, sorry, new minus old divided by old times 100. Okay, so we're saying the new value. So if we go back to the previous example of saying the good was 80 Rand, it's now 88 Rand. The new value is the 88 Rand. The old value is the 80 Rand divided by the old value times 100. Okay, so it's that is the rate of change. And you'll see, I'll take you through exactly what this looks like, because this is the simplified version, and this is the version I use with all the students. But how it looks in the formula sheet can look a little bit differently, but it means the exact same thing. Okay, so I will load a formula sheet and I break it down on the formula sheet to show you exactly what formula it is and what it actually means to help you so that when you see it in the exam, it's not a shock to you. Right, so we spoke slightly on the scarcity concept because again, scarcity, so these are the three main components, these are the three main concepts in economics, where we're saying it's either between your scarcity, your choice, and your opportunity cost. Okay, so scarcity, the state in which resources are available that are sometimes inefficient to satisfy people's wants. In other words, we have unlimited wants and limited resources. So we don't all have the same resources to satisfy our wants. That's why we have unlimited wants. Okay, and that's scarcity. If we're looking at choice, we're then deciding between two possible options. It can be 2, 3, 4, 5 options for that matter. Because we have so many choices, we want so many things, we are constantly deciding between what choice to make based on our resources, meaning based on our limited resources. And in our case, in most people's case, that becomes your income. Your income is your limited resource, right? We're not all rich. We're not all have unlimited means, resources to meet our wants. So we're making certain choices based on our resources, which is our income. Okay. Then we have opportunity cost. Okay. So what I say to the students is, I'm going to read the actual definition and then I'm going to use an example. Okay. So it's the value of the best alternative foregone that you are making in a certain instance. Okay, so it's the best alternative that you could have chosen. So what I say to the students here is, some people prefer your iPhones. Some people prefer Android, right? So I personally, this is my personal preference or my personal opinion, sorry, is that your Apple products, I really do believe that it's quite, they're brilliant phones. The mechanisms on the phones, the MacBooks, your iPads, all of those, absolutely brilliant. but I do believe there's some cult type thing involved with that, because once you're in, and that's the whole niche part of the iPhone, once you're in, right, and you buy the iPhone, you are instinctively going to want to utilize all of the elements of that phone, which means you do need the MacBook, you do need the iPad, and then you want the iPhone, the AirPods, and the watch to go with it, right? And then you get the opposite effect where it's a Samsung that's a lot more user-friendly to other devices, okay? So Samsung and iPhone are obviously competing with each other. So now if we had to think about it, the new iPhone that's coming out, and we know there's a new iPhone that's going to come out, and it's probably going to come out within the next month or two, right? So the iPhone, I don't even know what they're going to call it at this point, that's going to come out. So we're saying if the new iPhone comes out, and the new iPhone is probably going to cost you roughly between, I'd say between 30 and 40,000 Rand. So let's say 30,000 Rand for the principles of this example, okay? The new iPhone's going to come out, and that iPhone's going to cost you 30,000 Rand. The new Samsung will also come out, because you know those two companies are constantly fighting with each other, okay? So the new Samsung will come out, and the new Samsung is probably going to cost you about, let's say between 20 and 25,000 Rand. Let's say 25,000 Rand. Okay. Now, logically, because we know that every single human being is a rational human being, right? So we constantly look at the price. We want the cheaper option. We've always wanted the cheaper option because that's how we make our choices. But now, because iPhone has a certain appeal and you've had an iPhone before, okay, you're more leaning towards paying the, let's say, 30,000 Rand for the new iPhone, as opposed to the 25,000 Rand for the new Samsung, even though the Samsung is the cheaper option. Okay, so when we are saying it's the best alternative, we're saying, what did you have to give up in order to make this choice? Right? You're purchasing this iPhone. It's already 30,000 Rand. The alternative, or the best alternative, what you are giving up is this 25,000 Rand that you would have spent. Remember, if you had unlimited resources, meaning you could have purchased both phones if you had the money, which means then you are out the 30,000 Rand for the phone, as well as, or the 30,000 Rand for the iPhone, as well as the 25,000 Rand for the Samsung. Okay, so then you're out 55,000 Rand. Okay, so the alternative is, because we're constantly making choices, because we have scarcity, we're choosing between two options. So if you go and pick the Samsung, which is the 25,000 Rand, your opportunity cost becomes the 30,000 Rand you would have spent on the iPhone. Okay, so that's opportunity cost. You're always looking at what have you given up to make this choice. Okay, so if you're picking the 25,000 Rand Samsung, you have given up the choice. In this context, we're putting it in monetary values. You would have given up the 30,000 Rand you would have spent for the iPhone. Okay. Okay, so now we've covered economics, or the economic principles in words, which was the definition of what economics is. We kind of covered it in numbers a little bit slightly in terms of BODMAS, in terms of percentage change, in terms of our rates of change. Okay. Now we're looking more towards graphs. Okay. And the basics. I'm not going to assume you know anything, so I start from the very beginning. Okay. Main thing about what a graph is trying to tell you. Okay, and yeah, I'm not looking at, and I know people are working and all of that. We're not looking at your bar graphs and your pie charts. No. We're not looking at those kind of graphs. Ultimately, the graphs in economics is telling us relationships, right? So it's showing us cause and effect. Something has to happen for something else to happen, right? That's cause and effect. So it's showing us a relationship between two variables. And we say then it's the relationship between our, in this case, horizontal axis and our vertical axis, or our independent variable, our dependent variable, or our x-axis and our y-axis. Okay, all of those things go hand in hand with each other, right? So that's ultimately what graphs are trying to show. And for the principles of economics, in most cases, right, the graphs that we have in terms of relationships, it's either between price and quantity, and I'll explain what that looks like, income and consumption. And by consumption, we mean we are physically going to buy certain goods and services to consume them, right? Cost versus output, right? The cost of us producing this good versus the output we're going to get for manufacturing this good or service, okay? And then our supply and our demand, right? So there's always a balance between two variables. What are we trying to see? Is there a relationship? And we can usually say in economics, there is a relationship, otherwise there wouldn't be a graph. Okay. The main thing in the graphs, and I will give you a graph template as well, which I will load a little bit later on when we start talking about assignments and things like that, is you need to label your graph correctly. You need to label your axis correctly, because that already tells me before looking at what you're actually showing me in this graph, that already tells me you're on the right path. So step one is always labeling your graph correctly. Right. So now we're looking at our X and our Y axis, our vertical and our horizontal axis. So our vertical axis, our Y axis in economics will always show us our price. So our price is our independent variable, meaning how much of a good you are willing to consume, the quantity part of it, our dependent variable, right, depends on the price. Okay, so we're saying that at every single given price level, okay, and I'll put numerical values here, right? So if we're at P1, for example's sake, and let's say in this concept of this graph, we're looking at the graph for coffee. And I'll keep using coffee, shame, because I know a lot of people drink it. I'm a tea drinker, so I know I'm more the outlier usually. So in terms of coffee, right? If coffee was 5 Rand at P1, price level 1, P level 2 can be 10 Rand, right? So we're looking at how many consumers are going to demand coffee at 5 Rand. And because, again, we're rational people, we're saying that the lower the price, the more we're going to demand a good. Because we want it cheap. We want to spend less. Okay? Versus if the price now moves to P2, you can see now it's getting more expensive. So we're saying at P2, which can be 10 Rand, for example's sake, how many people are then going to demand coffee? And then we're saying the more expensive it becomes, the more people start going, do I really need this cup of coffee today? Right. So we're saying there is, in this case, a negative relationship. The more expensive something becomes, the less people are going to demand of it. And that's why that's how we end up drafting our curve. That's how we get a demand curve. Okay. So from school level, we know that graphs are usually, and in economics, it's usually a straight line, right? So our formula for a straight line, which comes in the next slide, right? Our formula for a straight line is y is equals to mx plus c. That's the formula for a straight line. What we are gaining from this formula is the mx part of it, so the gradient part of it. Okay, so gradient to us in economics will tell us how steep or how flat our curve is lying, right? So more towards, is it going to be a straight line, up straight, very vertical? Or is it going to be a little bit flatter, going more towards the horizontal side? And that tells us something in economics, right? So here again, okay, we're saying, if I go back to my coffee example, right? So remember P1 in my coffee example is that coffee is 5 Rand versus P2 where we're saying coffee is 10 Rand. Okay, so we're saying at P1, more people were demanding coffee. That's why they ended up on Q1. That's point A. Okay, versus P2, where I said to you, coffee is then 10 Rand. You can see then Q2, less people are willing to demand coffee at a higher price level. But that gives us our demand curve. If we draw a line from A to B or B to A, that gives us our demand curve for coffee. So depending on the question will then tell you, does the price level come down, meaning it was 10 Rand, it's now 5 Rand, meaning we've moved from P2 to P1, or it's 5 Rand, it was 5 Rand, it's now 10 Rand. It's become more expensive, meaning we are moving from P1 and ultimately Q1 upwards. So the principles of this is that coffee's become cheaper. So coffee was 10 Rand, it's now 5 Rand. Thus, more people are demanding coffee at the lower price. Okay, and we call this a movement along your curve. You are on the same demand curve for coffee. You're moving from point B to point A. Right. Now, that is our demand curve. For our supply curve, though, which I will take you through when we look at supply in a lot more detail, supply has a positive relationship. As the price increases, you'll see there our quantity is also increasing. Okay. And the logic behind that is, like I said to you, from a consumer perspective, a demand perspective, we want the lower price. So we're always going to say the lower the price, the more people are going to want to demand that good. Okay. The more we're going to want to buy that good because it's cheaper. But from a business's perspective, which is where the supply side of it comes from, they are saying from a business, if they can increase their price, a business owner can increase their price, they can afford to produce more. That's why there's a positive relationship. The more the price of the good is, the more they're selling it to us as consumers, the more the business can then afford to manufacture more goods and services. So there's more of a positive relationship with supply, whereas with demand, it's a negative relationship. The lower the price, the higher the quantity, and vice versa. Okay, so just to summarize again, a positive slope, okay, is more figure 3. There we're saying both variables will increase, or vice versa, both variables will decrease. It's a positive slope. That's our supply side of it. Our demand side of it has more of a negative slope, meaning as the one variable increases, the other one will decrease. So in this case, for figure 2, we're saying we've decreased in terms of our price from P2 to P1, okay? And then ultimately, because there's a negative relationship, our quantity has increased. So our price has decreased, quantity has increased. Okay, so there's always a negative relationship with the demand curve, and there's always a positive relationship then in terms of our supply curve, right? And in short summary, that's basically how we are going to assess you in economics. In graphs, meaning you're physically going to have to draw a demand curve, draw a supply curve, or in a business context, they have cost curves, right? To show us the cost and the output variables there. or numeracy, meaning you're physically going to have to calculate it for me and then tell me what that number means, because that's what we want to assess, is what does this number actually tell us in economics? Okay, is there a positive relationship between goods? Is there a negative relationship? Are we saying we need this good? Are we saying we don't need the good? Okay, or in physical words, meaning explain to us, define certain concepts. Okay, and that is it for this class. Right, so I'm just going to end the slideshow quickly. Are there any questions, or do you have any questions? I will make sure I load the slides and everything. Yes, you can unmute yourself.
No, ma'am, that was a mistake. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the recording. I will load everything on the YouTube channels, because there will be a YouTube channel as well, just so that I can add all the recordings, because I don't think ARC is just going to take way too long to load all of these recordings once we start going through the semester. Okay. I will do as many videos as I possibly can. I load a lot of videos on the slides as an extra for you to watch if you need any help. Alternatively, like I said, I am on my emails. Okay, so you can just pop me an email. But for now, I'm just going to load the pacer just to say, okay, I expect, because there's a workbook as well. Okay, please try and do the certain activities in the workbook so that in the next class I can try and see if there's anybody that needs help or doesn't understand the concept, so that it makes it easier as we move towards getting to the exam. All right.
Okay.
All right. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.